Hey there! This video is going to be a startup guide for shooting video on the Canon R50V. Now this is not going to be a full menu walkthrough, but I'm going to show you in this video how I personally set up the R50V to get the maximum image quality. So we're going to be talking about manual exposure, log, all that kind of stuff, and all the settings that I change on the camera when I get it and take it out of the box. Just want to give a quick shout out to B&H Photo who lent me this camera, and if you're looking to pick up some camera gear, go check out B&H. There are links down in the description for the R50V and all the gear that I use on a regular basis. Now if you're new to the channel, welcome. My name is Josh, and on this channel I focus on deep dive reviews and tutorials, and I do focus exclusively on video as I'm not much of a photographer. So like I said, this video is going to be a sort of a setup guide, startup guide, but not a full menu walkthrough. If you're interested in a detailed review of this camera, I made one of those, and I'll leave that linked down below as well. All right, so I got the R50V here, and the first thing we need to do is put it in video mode. So you can see it's photo here. This is S&F, which we will talk about briefly later, and we're gonna go right here to video mode. And we're gonna turn it on right here with the switch. So this is basically how it comes out of the box. There's a couple things I had to change just to make this tutorial, but let's just jump right in, press the menu button here, and we're gonna start right here with shooting mode. So when we select this, we have a couple different options for different exposure modes. I'm gonna choose manual exposure because that'll give us the best possible control and image quality. Now, coming back in the menu here, we can look at the different options. One thing I'm gonna recommend, I'm gonna go a little bit out of order here, is change the movie recording format. So I'm gonna choose this top option. You always wanna choose a 4:2 to 10-bit option. You have XF HEVCS, which is H.265, and you also have the XF AVCS, which is H.264. If you have a modern M series Mac computer or a fast PC that can handle H.265, I would probably choose this because the files are a little bit smaller and you get basically the same quality. So you can use either one to your preference, but we'll choose the XF HEVCS. Come back up here to the movie recording size. There are a few different tabs here, and under each of those you have options. So the first thing I want to do is I want to change this into 4K. And so there's 4K and then there's 4K crop. We'll talk about 4K crop in a second. So put it in regular 4K, which is oversampled from the full width of the sensor. So really crisp, detailed image. And if we go over to the next tab over using the dial up here, you see you have the frame rate. So you only have two options. You have 30, 29.97, or 24, 23.98. I shoot everything in 24, so I'm going to select this to 24. And just out of curiosity, if you go over to the next tab, you see LGOP, long op. That's the only option, so that's obviously you're going to choose that. Now, if you want to shoot in 4K 60, what you have to do is you have to put it into crop mode. So we put it into 4K 60 crop mode. Now we go to the frame rates, and we can come over here and we can select 60. But like I said, we want to shoot most of our stuff in 4K in 24 frames per second. All right, coming over to the second page, you have the sound recording on. Of course, you want to record sound for most situations. You have options for 2-channel or 4-channel. Most of the time it's going to be 2-channel. Under the audio settings here, you can change some settings for the built-in microphone. Sometimes they use auto, but generally I like to control it and change it to manual. And then you can come in here and change the recording level for whatever you think is appropriate based on the environment and that sort of stuff. A couple things here is I definitely turn off the wind filter and the audio noise reduction. I don't want the camera doing this. If I need to do any of that noise reduction, I will do it in post. So these are the settings for audio. Nothing to change on the third page. Onto the fourth page. The main thing here is going to be color mode. So we select this, and if you choose the first option here by pressing the info button, these are the options you're probably used to if you've used a Canon mirrorless camera before, but we are not going to use these. You also have the color filters, which I covered in my review. And then lastly is what we want is custom picture. So if we select this using the info, and you can choose your custom picture file here. So I'm going to select CP, and I'm going to choose Canon Log 3. That is going to give us the most dynamic range and the most flexibility in post and the highest image quality. So make sure you choose C Log 3. Okay, backing out of here, we can move on to the fifth tab over. We're going to change the white balance, and I don't like auto white balance, especially when you're shooting in log. Like, you should have a little bit more control over it. I'll just put it on sunny weather here, but you know, if you're in the shade or cloud, these are great places to start. Of course, tungsten light, and then you can also come in here and choose a specific Kelvin value. But for right now, just make sure you take it off of auto white balance because it will change and it'll drive you crazy when you're trying to color grade it. So just select something there. The next thing I want to talk about here is lens aberration corrections. Now this will vary depending on the lens you're using. Right now I have the Sigma 18 to 50 on here, which is probably the best lens for this camera in my opinion. So if you're looking to pick up one of those, link in description. You will have different options here depending on the lens you're using. So I recommend turning these on. Most mirrorless lenses nowadays are designed to work with in-camera corrections. The one thing you may want to have on or off is focus breathing correction. I have it off for right now, but depending on if you want that on or off, that will eliminate the focus breathing by just zooming in a little bit. So make sure you have all of these turned on. Now, coming over the 6th page, nothing to do here. 7th page, we have the tally lamp on or off. I like that on. That's the light on the front of the camera. Now for image stabilizer, this is really going to be depending on what you're doing. For most situations, I don't love digital IS, so I will turn it off. If you have a lens that has stabilization, you can play around with different combinations, and I showed the effects of that, in the detailed review that I mentioned before. So depending on what you're doing, you can turn this off, on, or enhanced. The on enhance will crop in and the enhance will crop in a little bit more. So I'll just leave it off for right now. Coming back out of this, we'll go to the 8th page over. And the one thing I want to change on here is going to be the log view assist. So if you come in here, this will basically add a Rec 709 display LUT. It doesn't bake it in, but allows you to see the image a lot better. So the first one is going to be for the back of the camera. So we're going to say on and BT 709. And then for HDMI, if you are using HDMI, you can also put it over HDMI. So I will also turn that one on here. There isn't really anything to change here. The false color is great on this camera, but it is actually grayed out because we have view assist on. So if you want to use false color, you have to turn view assist off. Really annoying, but that is the limitation here. For zebras, you can change these if you are a person that likes using zebras. Generally, the only thing I use them for is proper exposure on a gray card. And if you're interested in how to expose and color grade C-Log 3, I made a video about that, and I'll leave that link down below. But because this camera has false color in it, that's what I would recommend using if you're going to do that. But again, you have to turn the view assist off before you can turn false color on. Okay, coming over the 9th page here, there's a lot of stuff under shooting info display. So the first thing is the screen info settings. And basically when you toggle through these on the main screen by pressing the info button, this will show you these different options. So one thing is I want to have the histogram because that's the main thing I'm going to be using for exposure. And I want that on my first screen. So we hit info for edit screen, and you can add on whatever you want. So I want to add histogram display. So I select that and I come down here, hit OK. Come down here, hit OK, and then we're good to go there. But you can go in and toggle those on or off, or add things or whatever. Grid display if you want that. I usually let it off. In terms of histogram, this, like I said, that's the main thing I use for exposure. I don't use the exposure meter at the bottom. You want this on brightness, and the display, I like it on small. Large is better to see, but it takes up a lot of real estate on the screen. Coming down here, you have options for different electronic level sizes. I'm going to put this on small, but you could have it on large. The recording emphasis on, I really like on this camera. So let me show you what that means. Is when you press the record button, the little red box shows up around the outside. And I actually like that on this camera because it doesn't take up a lot of real estate. Some of them, it's a lot thicker, but I do like that on. It's helpful to see that you're rolling. Aspect markers, lens info display. So you can show the focus distance when you are in manual focus if you want. I generally don't like this. It's sort of distracting for manual focus. So I just disable this, but I will change this to feet because I'm in the United States. And then the focal length display is awesome. Definitely leave that enabled. What that is, if you back out, it'll show you the focal length on the screen there. So as you zoom the lens, this will change what focal length you're at. And you can see that on the screen. So that is really, really helpful. Coming back in here, we're going to go to the 10th page, and there's the auto power off temp. This is probably one of the biggest settings to change in this camera, most important. Please change this to high, otherwise the camera might potentially overheat. And this, for what I've been told, this won't damage your camera or anything like that, but basically it allows the physical body of the camera to get warmer, so you just have to be careful. But again, it's for like tripod work and long form recording and stuff like that, but please make sure you turn that on. Now the standby low res, this will save battery, but I turn it off because I want to have the highest quality image on my screen. I'm really good about turning the camera on and off off when I'm not using it, or turning it off when I'm not using it. So I just leave that on to get the best image quality on the screen. The HDMI display options, there is a slightly different option than some of the previous cameras. So if you need to record internally, this is the one that you have to have it set to, so we leave it there. But if you want to have an image go out over HDMI, these are the two options. One, the playback menu display go on the back screen, or over HDMI. Next, onto autofocus. Now, I don't really change a lot of the autofocus settings. You can tweak them depending on what you're doing and the kind of lenses that you're shooting with. But I like whole area, and I'm going to change the subject detection mode to auto unless I'm doing something specific. But otherwise, I leave most of this as default. The last thing here is manual focus stuff. So under peaking, I like high and red, and I do use manual focus a lot. So peaking is important to me, and I actually set one of the custom buttons to toggle this on and off, but I like high and red. Depending on what you're shooting, if you have a lot of red stuff in there, you can change the color to, yellow or blue, but generally I'm just kind of used to red. This is personal preference. The focus guide is really cool, but I'm gonna leave that off for right now. But basically, I kind of leave the autofocus stuff as is. Onto the first page of the wrench, just want to show you where the format card option is, because that comes in pretty handy. And onto the second page here, this is one thing I always like to mention. A lot of people wonder about the different frame rates that are available in your camera. And a lot of people say, hey Josh, I only see 25 and 50, I can't see 30 and 60. This is where you change this. So I'm in the United States, and so I use NTSC, which is based on 60 Hertz. So this is the one I would choose. If you are in Europe or other places that use PAL, you want to change this to 50, and this will show you frame rates like 25 and 50. But if you're looking for 24, 30, and 60, leave this on NTSC. Just want to mention where that is because people always ask me. The other thing on this pages that I change would be I turn the feature guide off and I turn the beep off. I just find that to be kind of annoying. The first thing here is screen brightness. I have it turned down a little bit for this tutorial, but generally when I'm outside, I would definitely recommend shooting at 7 to get the maximum brightness. But you don't want to have it too bright if you're in a darker environment, because the exposure won't look right. So if you're outside and it's sunny, set it to 7, but if you're somewhere where it's a lot darker, you might want to turn it down a little bit. Otherwise things might look a little bit overexposed and not look right. Lastly, on this page is the power saving. And I have these all disabled because, like I said, I set this up to do this tutorial, but also I just make sure I turn the camera off when I'm not using it to save battery. So if you're someone that forgets, you can change those, but that is what I would leave on here. Okay, coming over to the customized buttons for shooting here under the customized page 1. So you can change these to whatever works for you. Number 1 is going to be set to the live button, which if you use often enough, sure. I'm actually just going to disable it for right now, so it's the last option there, but you can set these to whatever you use on a regular basis. I do want to mention that there are buttons on here that work pretty well for what they're set up to. So ISO, autofocus, manual focus, white balance, and then the timer. So you do have those buttons by just pressing up, down, left, and right on the D-pad. The second one here is the AF on button. I'm going to leave that set. The third one is set for picture style, which I don't need to change very much. We're going to be shooting in C-Log 3. So I'm going to set this actually to the peaking. So I can turn focus peaking on and off. That's personally how I'd like to set that. So you can come in here and change a lot of the stuff, but I'm going to leave it as is, and you can play with it as you want. Shutter button function for movies. This doesn't have a separate record button, so this is kind of a silly thing, but definitely make sure that you have start stop movie recording on when you press the shutter button, because there is no actual other record button. The other thing to customize here is going to be the customize dials and control ring. Again, this is personal preference. For me, I don't really change the shutter speed very much because I leave it locked at double the frame rate. So the first one here is this dial up here, and I'm going to change that to aperture. The one on the back, this wheel here, I'm going to change this to ISO. And there isn't a third dial in the front, so this is actually the control ring, and I don't like control ring controls because I bump them all the time, so I'm going to turn that off. So that's how I have the custom stuff set up in this camera. Moving on here, you have the ISO expansion, and if you want to go above 12,800, you should turn this on. This camera is not amazing in low light, but if you want the ability to do that, I would just turn it on so you do have that option there. Next page over, you have release shutter without lens. I always turn this on in case you're using a manual focus lens, vintage lens, anything like that. It won't actually let you press record unless you have an electronic lens. So I always turn that on so that it always works. All right, well, that completes the menu. Let's back out of here and then talk about some basic exposure settings just to get started. So first of all, Like I said before, you want to set your shutter speed to double your frame rate. So most of the time I'm shooting in 4K at 24 frames per second. So the shutter speed should be double the frame rate. So 1/48 would be double 24. Now this camera, the closest you can get to that is 1/50, and that's totally fine. That most mirrorless cameras, that's what you do. So I was saying before, I don't really change the shutter speed very much because it's not really an exposure control for me for most situations. But you can see here it's 1/125. So I'm just going to touch this and I'm going to change this to 1/50, like I said. Now we have the aperture here, which you'll control based on the desired depth of field and light gathering that you want. And you might be confused, we're in manual mode, but it says ISO auto. So you are able to do that. So what you want to do here is change it from auto to the base ISO, which is 400. Now, this is a little bit weird for C-Log 3 because all other cameras I've shot on with Canon, if you're shooting in C-Log 2 or C-Log 3, the base ISO is 800. The original C-Log was 400. But you can always tell the base ISO because if you see it says 400 here, if I go down by a third of a stop, the little L shows up. And that's saying you're below the base ISO. So when you go to 400, it goes away. On other manufacturers, even like Sony, there's a little bar next to the ISO when you drop below the base. So when you see that go away, you know you're at the base ISO here. So these are the basic exposure controls. And like I said earlier, if you're want to learn how to expose and color grade C-Log 3, again, go check out that video, linked in the description. So now we have the menu set up and some basic exposure stuff ready to go. I want to take a few minutes to talk about S&F mode. S&F stands for slow and fast. And the reason why I want to mention it is because it's a really cool feature in this camera. And if you are a Canon mirrorless shooter, you may not have been exposed to this. It is in their cinema cameras and it's in some other brands as well. Like in Sony, it's S&Q mode or high frame rate mode, those sorts of things. But I want to show you in this camera because it's a little bit different and I really enjoy using it for a few different things. So first thing we have to do is, like I showed you earlier on the top of the camera, we're going to change the mode dial from video to S&F. And then in the camera, we're going to see it does show S&F up here on the upper left. And when we come in the menu, we're going to have some different options. So first of all, we have S&F, and we have to change this to S&F with manual exposure. It doesn't carry over the manual exposure from the regular mode. So we're going to select that. And then we're going to come and change our movie recording format. I know we already did this, but that was in the non-S&F mode. So again, we'll choose that top option, the XFHEVCS 42210-bit. And when we come in here under the movie recording settings, you have another tab here. So basically you have the resolution, we have the frame rate that it's capturing at, the frame rate it's recording at, and we have our compression. So let's change this to 4K. And if you come over here, this is going to be what you're capturing the image at, and like I said, this is what you're recording at. So we're going to change our base rate to 24, but again, it depends on what you want. And there aren't as many options for slow modes, meaning a frame rate that is higher than 24 frames per second, because you can only get 60 frames per second, like I mentioned before, in 4K 60 crop mode. So let's say we want to start by talking about slow motion. So to do that, you actually have to come back, put this in 4K crop mode. And when you come over here, you can see you do have 60 frames per second as an option. And it does give you a lot of information here. It says, look, I'm recording at 60 frames per second, but storing the file at 23.98 or 24, and it's slowing it down by 2.5. So if we select this, I do want to mention that you should come back out here and change, which it did, the shutter speed to 1/125, because that would be the closest thing you get to double 60 frames per second, which would be 1/120. So 1/125 is good for that. Now let's talk about time lapses. And time lapses would be you're recording less frames per second and then speeding it up in the camera. So if we come under the movie recording size here, I'm going to change this back to the full 4K, not the crop mode. And when we come over to the second screen here, I'm going to choose 1, and the reason for that is it will record 1 frame every second and it will speed it up by 24 times. If you want to make it not as sped up, then you can obviously choose 2, that's 12 times, and so on. But I like 1 frame per second generally for my time lapses. But again, depends on what you're trying to capture. And in terms of shutter speed for S&F mode or for time lapse mode, this again will depend on what you want to do. But for me personally, I like a pretty slow shutter speed to get a little bit more motion blur. So you need to experiment with that. Often I'll use something like 1/25 if I want a little bit more motion blur. If you want it sharper and more jittery looking, then you can crank up the shutter speed a little bit. There are no rules to this. It's kind of personal preference. Anyways, I just wanted to share basically how I would set up and use this camera. If you found value in this video, please consider hitting subscribe. It'd be greatly appreciated. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.